What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, managing editor, FightfulMMA.com. If you've said, man, I haven't heard a lot about MMA lately, it's because WrestleMania dominated all throughout this weekend, but there's still some MMA news that even came out of that. And we turn right back around right after the 7-hour show that was WrestleMania. And we got UFC 236 with two big title fights and some other stuff. But we are joined by noted pro wrestling scoopster James Lynch. James, how are you?
I'm doing well, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing great. And Showdown Joe. Joe, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Enjoying this beautiful weather. And yeah, I tried to catch a bit of that WrestleMania stuff, but I lived through you. So I'll get all my updates right now.
So I want to get some of your thoughts on WrestleMania. And I don't know how informed you guys are on some of this stuff, but I'll fill you in. To start off this week, really last week, WrestleMania starts Thursday, in a sense. People start flying into town. You've got an event. One of those is Josh Barnett's Bloodsport, a very unique approach. Matches only end by KO or submission. Dan Severn took on Frank Mir there. Frank Mir called out Brock Lesnar. A lot of that. You have Josh Barnett there. You have Phil Baroni there. Joe, this is not anything new as it pertains to pro or MMA and the pro wrestling crossover, as especially in Japan, it started off a long time ago. I remember even 10 years ago, like Tim Sylvia and Kevin Randleman would do things here and there. But this seems to be a legitimate avenue for a lot of former fighters or even current fighters to get into, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. If it's something that they enjoy doing and it's an avenue to generate more income for themselves and their families, I don't see why not. I mean, I had a conversation with Jimmy Van when we had our lunch about 2-3 weeks ago. And he's always perplexed by some of the MMA fans that, can't stand pro wrestling and, even took shots at Fightful for having a crossover site. And I'm like, who cares what they think? Who cares what they say? I mean, if this is what people want to watch, this is what former UFC fighters or current UFC fighters or MMA fighters want to do it, man. Who cares what people think?
To me, I don't see that much of a difference in this and getting into acting. It's a performance art, so to speak. Yeah. And James, I mean, it's been something that I've noticed in your interviews, especially. Occasionally, I'd say about 2 out of every 10, you'll get that person that says, no, never, man. But like a giant portion of these people are like, yeah, if the money's there, why not?
Yeah, Curtis Millender had a WrestleMania viewing party. I mean, it just goes to show you, and he's fighting this weekend. It just goes to show, that there's people who are huge fans and there's people who want nothing to do with it. But regardless, I think pro wrestling at some point has come on someone's radar in their lives. Even my wife, she's not even like a big MMA fan, but she watched pro wrestling when she was growing up. So it's like one of those things where it's such a big company and such a big sport that it's really reached a lot of different people. And the people who just are totally against it, you're a rare breed. I'll just say that.
So let's talk about WrestleMania itself before we get into some Hall of Fame news. But Conor McGregor, there's an aspect to this because, of course, there is. Becky Lynch, who has actually done some training at SBG in the past, won the WWE Raw and SmackDown championships. Conor McGregor would chime in and said the following: "Congrats to Ireland's Becky Lynch, WWE's first champ. Wow, what a match these ladies put on. Ronda Rousey is something special in that ring, as is Charlotte Flair of the Flair dynasty. Stephanie McMahon, you are right. I could not do what these athletes do. Or could I?" And then he went to clarify because somebody said, she's not the first champ. Conor McGregor even went to put himself over, saying, one of these is a WCW belt. Both belts must be won under the same organization. Interim titles, like a bunch of stuff that, quite frankly, just wasn't true. Because it's Conor. We hear it all the time. James, I would be shocked if Conor McGregor never did anything in pro wrestling. Would be shocked because he's not dumb. The whole comment, those guys are pussies. He knows what he's doing. I don't want to say he's a smart guy, but he is, because he does a lot of dumb, ignorant shit. He does. But he's smart with a lot of stuff that he does, James, and I would expect to see him.
Just tell us how you really feel about Conor, Sean. No, I think that no, absolutely he'll be there. I mean, look, when you reach a certain level of stardom like Conor has, you're going to be in the WWE. Donald Trump was in the WWE. Floyd Mayweather. I mean, it's only a matter of time. Conor is in that conversation of superstars, and he will be in there at some point. It's just a matter of when. I don't know what the rule is with the UFC and his contract right now, but I think at some point you will see him there. And it just, again, he knows the value that pro wrestlers, the money they make and just the publicity they get. I watched that John Oliver thing last week. I didn't realize how big wrestling actually is when they broke down the numbers, but I mean, why not? Yeah, he'll be there for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, before Conor's a fighter, Conor is a businessman, and he knows that there's a lot of dollars in the WWE. And
a lot of people will say, oh, maybe he can't do it. He doesn't have the background that Rousey has. Joe, Floyd Mayweather had a damn good match with the Big Show like in 2008. This isn't out of the realm of possibility, and there are a whole lot of parallels between Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor, as we've seen in the past.
I don't think for a guy like Conor McGregor it'd be rocket science to figure out what to do, how to do it, follow the script, do what you need to do. I think he'd be absolutely fantastic if he was to consider doing something with the WWE or anything pro wrestling. He's got to keep his head in check. We all know that he could be a little crazy, but other than that, I think he'd be absolutely fantastic. Why not? And he would bring a very large crossover audience to the WWE, which is what we always wanted when Brock Lesnar first came. That's a big audience to bring over. He'll do the same thing. MMA fans will follow him religiously.
So the night before at the WWE Hall of Fame, 61-year-old stroke survivor, cancer survivor Bret Hart is in the ring accepting his induction on behalf of the Hart Foundation, along with his niece Natalia, who is Jim the Anvil Neidhart's daughter. During this, a 26-year-old amateur MMA fighter stormed the ring and tackled Bret Hart. Now, in a situation like that, all kinds of things could go wrong. What went wrong for this guy was he was surrounded by pro wrestlers, MMA fighters, and the like. Joe, have you seen this video?
I did see the video, yep.
First guy, almost first guy to hit the ring is Travis Brown. And I know that a lot of fun is poked at Travis Brown about his MMA shortcomings, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say about him, about some accusations that have been made personally. As I've said on previous shows, Joe, if there are 10,000 people in the Barclays Center, there are 9,999 that you want hitting that ring before Travis Brown. Oh, and there are probably that same number minus one that you want hitting the ring before Davey Boy Smith Jr., a product of Billy Robinson and Josh Barnett, the 300-pound son of the British Bulldog, who followed as well. Joe, what was your thought when you saw this? There's really no point in talking about the MMA career of this fella, but just the idiocy of this. And hey, good thing that a guy like Travis Brown and some of those guys were around.
You know what? When I first saw it, I mean, the first thing that came to mind, the first word was disgusted. I'm really disgusted. When I saw that, I was like, dude, what are you doing? Right? I know there's been some talk about there's a mental issue and stuff like that. And, but it was just wrong. And I wouldn't condone what Travis Brown did, but he gave that guy an ass whooping. And then someone outside of the ring threw his own little sucker punch. That connected.
Cash Wilder.
Yeah, that connected pretty good. So, listen, emotions flare up. You're sitting there, you're watching a Hall of Famer and Bret Hart give his speech, and then someone crashes it and tackles him. Well, I think the three of us might go into self-defense mode or protection mode, right? You go in there trying to protect somebody, and Travis Brown was close enough. He went in there and did what he had to do. I mean, I'm not condoning it, but I do understand it. I think it was disgusting to see it. I think this person was saying that it was just a work. It was just a work. And
no. It was, dude. It was very real and not something that, it kind of wasn't something they were prepared for. The setup was, obviously they weren't prepared for it, but the setup was different than last year's. Had Bret been on a stage like previous years instead of in a ring, he would have seen it coming. Even then, still a little bit odd. The guy that did it very clearly has some mental issues, but we're talking about a guy who has MMA experience. We're talking about a guy who was 6'2". I assume he's near probably about 185, 190 pounds if he fought at welterweight. If you have that type of experience, you could probably hurt somebody. And Monica Seles got freaking stabbed by a crazed fan. So when people say, was it too much? I'm thinking, you never know if it's too much.
Yeah, it totally unpredictable, total fluke. I mean, no one could have predicted something like this was going to happen. It's funny, actually. A friend of mine who's a media member, works for Cage Side Press, Rodney Edgar's also an MMA fighter, and he's actually challenged this guy to do a fight. Not that he'll take it, but you know, it's. Yeah, I mean, clearly, yeah, there's some serious issues there. Like, what possible positive thing was going to come out of this guy doing that? I mean, obviously there's something wrong there. But my first reaction, I think, like Joe, was I was completely disgusted. Bret Hart, I mean, growing up in Canada, especially, this guy was an icon, and you know, anyone to do any harm to this guy is just, I don't know, it runs deep. I was pretty, like, I remember seeing the video, and I was just like, I got angry. I mean, like, why would someone do something like that? So I don't know. I'm not a doctor, clearly, but yeah, it was just very upsetting to see. That's the best way to put it. And you know, he got punched in the face at the end. Can't say I was too upset about that.
Yeah, Bret was very lighthearted about it. Afterwards, made a little bit of a joke, which, you know, he doesn't always do. Some people see him as a bitter guy, but I was told he was in good spirits at WrestleMania.
You know what? I don't think he's a bitter guy. I know that the reputation there, Sean, is that he's a bitter guy. We were lucky, super lucky, when the UFC was in Calgary. We got to meet Bret Hart, and he took a big time liking to Antonio Carvalho.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and we were in not the lobby, but more or less there's a bunch of couches set up to the left of the lobby, and he literally must have had a good half hour, 45-minute conversation solely focusing on Antonio, talking about his career, talking about what, you know, potentially what Antonio could do for his career. And he was just super cool, very chilled, very calm, and you know, and you know, had that look about him that, you know, don't piss him off, but really good guy. So I after you meet somebody like that in that type of environment, when I read some of the stuff about him, especially in the past, I know whatever happened with Shawn Michaels back in the day, it kind of made him bitter. I get that for sure, but
lots of stuff.
Yeah, lots of stuff. Well, I don't. That's the extent of what I know. So, but
whatever happened to Carvalho? He got released. He was like did 1, 2 of 3, got released and never fought again. I know he's supposed to fight in World Series of Fighting, but man, I remember that entrance, and that was such a cool moment. Him and Ric Flair got some good reactions from fans at UFC events, but here we are again. We weren't here last week, so it is that time of the month where we talk about what Jose Aldo says he's going to do besides MMA fighting. Soccer, I don't know, I think one time he wanted to be a professional harmonica player. He says that he might end up boxing after this, James. Well, what are your thoughts? Do you think that Jose Aldo gets into boxing?
Maybe. We'll see. It's really going to depend what happens with this fight. I think it's really going to determine what sort of you know, takes place in terms of what's happening after. But don't rule it out. I mean, you never know with these guys. You know, again, they have to look at the opportunities that are outside the UFC. I mean, you know, we've seen it time and time again. These guys don't get treated the best. So I think, you know, if he's talking about this and he wants to make a run at it. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Fabio Maldonado actually boxed in Toronto, I think it was a couple weekends ago. Wow. So he's actually doing both, you know, outside of the UFC. So I think, you know, a lot of these fighters are seeing the opportunities outside of the cage per se, as far as, you know, combat sports.
And Joe, we see, you know, it's that time of the week where we talk about the latest Conor McGregor legal issues. He had the charges reduced in the cell phone incident, and then eventually, I believe the lawsuit was dropped. However, now the Irish Mirror is reporting that McGregor is being accused of participating in a bar fight at the Maple Arch pub in Dublin. Are you surprised?
No. And I know one of the situations with Conor involved organized crime. This goes way back, Sean, long before we had the pleasure of having James Lynch join us on the 3-man podcast. We talked about this, and one of the guys that Conor was involved with was not, and I stress the word not, the person you want to mess with. It doesn't matter if you're a real life world champion, champ, mixed martial artist. There are certain people in society you do not want to mess with, because they don't care what you do for a living and how tough you are. They will finish you off, if you know what I'm saying. So there's been some other information that's come out regarding that. Conor is just, you know, he's got to be careful, man. You can't be living this invincible life. You will cross paths with the wrong people. But it doesn't seem to surprise me with all the stuff that's happening with him. We all know he said it a long time ago. I'm young. I'm in this game. I'm going to make my money. I'm going to get out. Well, he made his money, obviously, not just with the UFC, but really with that Floyd Mayweather fight. So, you know, maybe he should get out. But if he wants to compete and he still wants to be in the public eye, he's going to have media all over him. And the media in North America is nothing compared to the media in Europe, specifically in England and Ireland. They will roast you at any opportunity that they can. Anything, any small nugget that they can get will blow up. So got to be careful.
Now, we weren't here last week to talk about this, so I wanted to get quick thoughts. UFC Philadelphia, we saw Justin Gaethje with a big KO over Edson Barboza. That fight was exactly what I wanted, a kick fight and a KO. Josh Emmett defeated Michael Johnson. Michelle Watterson over Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Jack Hermanson submitted David Branch real quick. Casey Kenny stepped in and beat Ray Borg. Alex Perez over Mark De La Rosa as far as ranked fights go. James, any quick thoughts on this UFC Philadelphia show?
A lot of things. Yeah, I mean, Gaethje obviously setting himself up with a really good fight after that win. I mean, that was super impressive. Hermanson, we should mention, is now fighting Jacare Souza on the UFC Fort Lauderdale card with Yoel Romero out, so good for him. Emmett looked good, even though, well, actually didn't look great, and then he just ended up getting the KO at the end. Poor Michael Johnson, now 19-14 in his career. I'm trying to think of some other things. Des Green, hopefully gets on that Rochester card. That was a big win over Ross Pearson, who I'm sure you guys saw has retired. I'm sure we can talk a little bit about that. And yeah, Casey Kenny getting a pretty controversial win, but you know, Borg coming in overweight. I know he talked about this on Luke Thomas's show that he slipped in the bathtub, but just you know, really bad luck for Ray Borg. And you know, now he falls to 11-4. So this is a good card overall, but yeah, some interesting notes from it for sure.
Joe, how about you?
Well, you know, I can't stand seeing Michael Johnson get dropped the way he dropped. He was ahead on those cards, and you know, he was a guy that I got to see almost every single Titan show that I did because he trains over right next to the venue. So I'm sad to see that, but good on Josh Emmett, who just showed the will to win and showed his resolve to continue fighting. And you know, he knew going into that third round that he had to win. And of course, Justin Gaethje and Edson Barboza, it's exactly what we all wanted. We all were almost hesitant to say, "Damn it, these fights are put together. We know what we want, but it rarely happens." Well, they gave us what we wanted, and Justin Gaethje is something special. In his post-fight interview, I wouldn't wish this on my worst opponents, but I absolutely love doing this. So good for him. And Hermanson defeating David Branch in 49 seconds by submission. Ooh, now James did mention that he's headlining with Jacare in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know how pissed off people are in Fort Lauderdale, because that is in essence Yoel Romero territory. Every time, you know, Titan would have an event there, it's the Cuban Flair, the ATT guys, or whomever would show up there, and they are massively popular over there. So the main event in general, the selection of the main event in Fort Lauderdale was very strategic by the UFC. Yoel Romero is the guy that would guarantee selling out that venue pretty much, and unfortunately he's gone. It's still an okay fight if you ask me, but it's completely different when it's Yoel Romero and Jacare Souza the rematch.
James, you mentioned Ross Pearson retiring after the Desmond Green loss. He was one of my I got 5 on it picks just because of the unpredictability. I think the unpredictability's gone. Gone are the days where he's winning, losing, winning, losing, winning. He's lost 6 or I think 7 of 8. And this was one, I mean, prior to that, he wasn't getting knocked out all the time. He's got knocked out a couple of times in recent years. The Dan Hooker KO, the Desmond Green TKO. I do think it's time, because he had the fight of the night against McDessie, and I'm sure that's nice. He got that pay, but he was at least early on, when inconsistent, he would occasionally win, and when he didn't, he would have a fight of the night-esque fight like with Edson Barboza. Those days are gone. That's not the Ross Pearson we see anymore. And he's been in the UFC for a decade now, James. I think it was the right call.
I agree. Should mention though, he's only 34. I know that's not like, you know, super young, but it's not super old either.
Oh, he's got a bare knuckle boxing fight in his future.
I was just gonna say, yeah. So I think we'll probably see him go do that. You know, it's weird to think that he has a win over Paul Felder. You know, which you look at how good Paul Felder is and where he's ranked right now. But yeah, I mean, it was time. You know, again, if he had fought to decisions a lot and, you know, been kind of a boring fighter, he would have been released from the UFC a while ago. But yeah, I think we'll see him in bare knuckle. Just that's what a lot of these fighters are doing when they're done with their careers.
He's got some good names on his resume. Spencer Fisher, Gray Maynard, I think Dennis Seaver. Did he beat George Sotiropoulos back in the day? I think he did. A guy who I completely forgot about. But yeah, I know that it was towards the end of Sotiropoulos' run. But Joe, any thoughts, memories of Ross Pearson? I'm sure that you covered several of his fights.
Nothing positive. But I saw him once, James, when Bellator was in town up at Rama, and I would say that wasn't a big fan of this guy.
Bury him. I'm here for the clicks, Joe. Bury him.
Too cool for school, if you know what I'm saying, right? Okay. Just simply too cool for school. And I tried to engage him a bit more, and he brushed me off like I was some jabroni. And I said, "See ya, good on you. No, not interested."
Well, at least we know he's a good judge of character.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Did you all hear about the other big retirement? Undefeated MMA fighter retiring. Dave Bautista announced his retirement this weekend. Any thoughts on that, James? We won't see Bautista in the ring or cage.
I was really hoping. I was really hoping we'd see him on the circuit again. Yeah, I mean, what a great career. Why not go out on top, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Also, what happened last week? We were here to talk about one championship. Now, I expected this card to get a lot more buzz than it did. It got more buzz than it usually does. Had a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'm staying up to watch one," and heard some people complaining about staying up for coverage and how they'd be awake. But Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson secures a win. No big surprise. But then you got Angela Lee losing. You've got Eddie Alvarez losing. Then you have the people who are pretending that Eddie Alvarez has always sucked or something, which is super weird. Gary Tonin won. But Bibiano Fernandez won. Shinya Aoki won. There's some damn good names on this show, Joe. But your thoughts coming out of that one championship card?
I didn't think Eddie was going to lose. I mean, I don't care what anyone says, but that really caught me by surprise. I didn't think Shinya was going to win either. And he pulls off an arm triangle choke in what, like 2.5 minutes? So yeah, that was pretty impressive. Bibiano Fernandez quietly, again, keeps doing his thing, although it was disqualification, is what it is. DJ gets a finish midway through second round. So overall, I mean, I would love to have seen the card live, but Eddie losing, I'm completely, TKO, dude. Didn't even go around.
One can't be happy about that, James.
No, you spend all this money, and he was, again, UFC champion, Bellator champion, and to lose, it's not just the way he lost. Like, had he lost like a decision or something, and it was just like, a close fight, fair enough. But getting finished the way he did, having his hands over his face the way he did, I mean, is this it for him? I mean, I don't know. Like, he has taken a lot of damage in his career, but it's, and it's not like he's getting any younger, but I don't know, man. I mean, here's the thing. Like, it's not as if this would have been a good scenario for one, if the guy that beat him was like an up and comer that you could really build around, but he lost like not that long ago. So it's like, you can't even build him up. It's not even like a Zach, kind of like a Zach Freeman and Pico situation in a way. So it's, the whole thing, is bad for them. They got to give him some guy off the street, to fight Eddie next to get him back up there, because you can't have him lose too.
Yeah,
but, Eddie just looked. That was one of his worst performances ever. It was just brutal.
Yeah, he needs a gimme fight, but it doesn't look like a ton of gimme fights on UFC 236 this weekend. The odds are real close on a lot of these fights. Let's go ahead and talk about it. UFC 236, Holloway versus Poirier 2. Early on this show, there's Brandon Davis, -170 against Randy Costa, +150. You have Lauren Mueller, a +155. Poliana Botelho, a -175. And then you have Boston Salmon, -135 against Khalid Taha, which honestly kind of sounds like a fish too. Who is going to win this underwater battle of...
They need a three-way with Johnny Walker to have a great... Anyways, we'll let it go.
Yeah. We also have Max Griffin, -110. Zalim Imadev, -110. So early on this show, Jalen Turner, -125. Matt Frivola, +105. Before we get into some of the names that people really know about, James, what stands out to you among these fights that I just brought out, and maybe some of these personalities?
A couple interesting tidbits. First off, Randy Costa getting this fight is very surprising. He's only got 4 fights. I actually interviewed him. He was supposed to fight on the Cage Titans card last weekend, and then he gets a call up to the UFC instead. And when I interviewed him, I was like, is this the fight you think that's going to get you on Contender Series? I didn't think he'd get signed to the UFC. He has some good connections. He's a Lausanne guy. He trains Lausanne's MMA. Everyone that I've talked to says this kid's the real deal, but I worry about the experience here fighting a guy that's got 15 fights in Brandon Davis, who's always a gamer, who's also moving down to 35. So I'm really intrigued by this fight because, clearly Costa, if you're just looking at this on paper, very inexperienced, but you never know. We've seen some crazy things happen here. Other fight I'm really excited for that I think could be fight of the night, Bilal Muhammad, Curtis Millender. I think that's great. Both guys coming off losses. Millender losing, I think it was last month to Zaleski, or at least it was very not that long ago. So he's got to get back on the track. Boston Salmon, I think he needs a little bit more seasoning.
God damn.
Because he fought on Contender Series. He's had 3 canceled fights in the UFC. It's crazy. So his last fight was actually July of 2017. So I don't know if that layoff is going to affect him a lot. If he does, we're certainly going to grill him after the fight.
Hopefully he doesn't get seared. Jesus.
And this Max Griffin and Amadev fight, I believe that's how you say his last name, is interesting because I talked to Griffin and apparently they trained a little bit together at Extreme Couture, and he said that basically this guy is like a bully in the gym. Like he doesn't know when to stop. So it's kind of personal here. And Griffin, with what happened in his last fight with Alves, when, I think a lot of people felt like he won that decision over Thiago Alves, he's got a chip on his shoulder because he already doesn't like this guy because of the experience at Extreme. And, he needs a win too. He's, lost a couple in a row now. This should be very interesting. Everyone that I've talked to says this Amadev kid is amazing and he's going to be the future. He's 8-0, but we'll see. Griffin beat Mike Perry not that long ago. So I think that's interesting as well. A lot of really good fights in this prelim, actually. I'm quite excited.
Yeah. One of those is Curtis Millender and Bilal Muhammad. And Joe, we said after Bilal Muhammad's last performance, he ain't getting off the Fight Pass prelims anytime soon. He's not finishing anybody. He had won 4 in a row, but then dropped that fight to Jeff Neal. He's in what I think is a very good matchup with Curtis Millender. And I don't mean like a stylistic matchup for either one. I just mean this is a good fight. Curtis Millender stepped into the UFC, had a great 2018, and ran into Zaleski dos Santos. And sometimes you're just going to run into a Zaleski dos Santos who just mollywopped him. He's back a month later. What does that say to you that Millender was willing to take this fight and get right back in there off this impressive winning streak that it just ended?
Well, a lot of guys, when they lose, they're almost afraid, or girls, they're afraid to get back on the horse. They want to reevaluate everything. He's upset with that fight. Dos Santos is no joke. I mean, he shouldn't be upset, but he wants to get in there. He wants to, put on a good fight, and Bilal Muhammad will give it to him because we all know Bilal Muhammad doesn't seem to have a reverse gear. Neither does he have a neutral gear. It's forward, 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 punish, 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 punish. And Millender, we know, can go toe-to-toe with some of the best strikers, Thiago Alves, Bahrouzada. So, yeah, this is, I think James may be bang on with this potential fight of the night candidate here because it's going to be an exciting fight for sure.
The odds on this one have Bilal Muhammad at -140, Millender at +120. What do you think of that line, James?
I'm actually surprised. I think Millender would be the favorite just with his winning streak. Although, saying that, there's one guy who's finished Bilal, and that was Vicente Luque. So Bilal's tough to finish. That's the thing. If Millender can't put him out, and I think people are also banking on the fact that Millender clearly has a hole in his ground game. I mean, look how quickly, and like Joe mentioned, Zaleski's not a slouch, but that was certainly a quick, not a great performance from Millender. So I don't know. I mean, this is kind of a coin flip in my opinion. If it stays standing, both guys are good strikers. I don't think but saying that, if you want to put 5 on it, I think Millender at +120 is not too bad, to be honest.
Well, James, he's had 4 losses, 3 of which were submissions, right?
Yeah, exactly. So but is Bilal Muhammad, is he going to go and take this to the mat? Probably.
Yeah, Bilal Muhammad has never submitted anybody.
Exactly. So you see where the odds are there, right? So it could be interesting. Now, Bilal should potentially surprise everybody. Get this takedown, clinch, takedown, and work for a submission. The guy's lost 3 or 4 from submissions, right?
One thing I should mention on this fight, Millender actually has a decent height and reach advantage in this fight. He's 6'2" with a 70-inch reach. Bilal's only 5'10" with a 71-inch reach. So if he can't get on the inside, Millender could just, pick him away at it with the striking here. So that's kind of interesting too. Not saying he'll win, but that's still one of those things to, keep in mind.
An interesting fight, Alexandre Pantoja, Wilson Hayes. Now, Wilson Hayes is a far cry from the fighter that competed for the UFC Flyweight Championship 2 years ago. He had lost 3 fights in a row, granted to very top talent in Mighty Mouse Cejudo Moraga. He picked up that win over Ben Wynn, but Pantoja is, I think he's won 4 or 5. James, am I alone in just suspecting, by the way, Pantoja a -150 favorite, Wilson Hayes a +130. Loser gone?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Pairing away the division.
Yeah. Look at the weight class. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt, but this is the division where Casey Kenny was ranked number 15 before his bantamweight debut in the company, and his last fight wasn't at flyweight either, and they still put him in the rankings. They literally have no clue what they're doing with this division.
Oh, big time. And I think, and if I'm not mistaken, Casey was put in there before he was brought into the UFC. I think sometimes for whatever reason, I heard this from a panelist that they just have Contender Series winners in the rankings for some reason.
Woof.
Which is terrible.
That is like, how do you see this one going?
This is a close fight. I don't think it's such a runaway for Pantoja. I think Hayes, he has that experience. The thing is, you got to look at who Wilson Hayes has fought. I think that's something that gets kind of, Moraga,
Very
that's
important.
a fight he probably should have won. Cejudo, Demetrius Johnson, fought for Miga, lost, has a win over Ortiz. And if you look at Pantoja, his last loss was against Ortiz. MMA math doesn't always work. I liked his performance against Ben Nguyen. I think this is going to be close. I think this will hit the judges' scorecards. I think if you're looking for a bet in this fight, maybe take the over. I want to see what that's actually at right now. It is probably insane. No, it's only minus 215. So that might be worth it because I think this is a coin flip. I don't think it's such a clear-cut fight. And like I said, they have similar records, but I think that if you look at the level of competition, like we forget Hayes fought Patricio Pitbull in Bellator at featherweight. Like this guy's fought everyone. So I think that can pay off a little bit in this fight. But it's I'll go Pantoja, but don't underestimate Hayes. I think if you're looking at value in this fight, it's definitely on Hayes.
How about you, Joe? What do you see for the future of the loser, which I think is more interesting than the future of the winner, and how this fight could end up?
Well, we just officially hit our quota for every single Holy Smokes podcast to mention a Pitbull brother. So we did it. Congratulations, James.
And the death of the flyweight division.
Yeah. I don't think it's that bad. I don't think if either one of these guys loses, they actually get cut. If there is going to be a cut and a removal, it'd probably be Wilson Hayes, but I think he still has options because he's still fairly popular globally. A lot of organizations would be more than happy to bring him onto the roster. In terms of Pantoja and the way he competes, I think he's a fantastic fighter. He's only lost once, if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry, he's got 3 losses, but only once in the UFC, and that was to Ortiz. So we'll see what happens. But in my opinion, I think he's more safe than what Wilson Hayes is, right? So, we'll see. It's a division that unfortunately is just slowly but surely fiddling away, right? So.
Well, here's why we do this podcast. It's to break down Ovince St. Preux versus Nikita Krylov. I would almost be shocked if Ovince St. Preux didn't end up Von Flue choking Nikita Krylov. I have seen no marked improvements in Nikita Krylov at all in the last several years. Even when he was winning fights, I saw him doing the same old things that would get him beat before. Joe, OSP is one of those guys, and I've never flat out predicted a Von Flue choke because you got to be real stupid to get caught into it. But the thing is, Ovince St. Preux went from a tactic that his opponent has to put himself in to being able to put his opponent in it before they can really even capitalize. There are a lot of times when people get caught in a Von Flue, and it's because they just hold on to that guillotine too long. What St. Preux has started to do is take people down, and really before they can remove the guillotine, he's locking that in. You can tell he's worked on that. And that is not an offensive tactic in which a lot of people can even use, let alone perfect, Joe. I straight up think that he's going to Von Flue Nikita Krylov again. And I might not be so mad about it this time.
I think you'll lose your marbles. I think you
probably will.
Or you might just throw up some crazy epic tweets. I told you so. The first thing that I saw when I saw this fight, I'm like, he'll probably Von Flue choke him as well. I believe that. What I'm more surprised about are the odds at minus 105 for OSP and minus 115 for Nikita Krylov. I think there should be way further apart here. OSP with a bit more of a favorite here, if not a lot more of a favorite here. So there's value right there on the minus 105, if you ask me. I just think OSP is going to, emerge victorious in this fight here. I mean, a fight's a fight, anything can happen. I just don't see what Krylov's going to do to OSP that he's never seen before. So
Krylov has won 9 of his last 11. That is incredibly misleading. I am almost shocked that this guy beat Emmanuel Newton and Fabio Maldonado, but am I alone in that? I mean, maybe I'm a little hard on him, James, but man, the guy makes so many basic errors in the cage that it's unbelievable. What do you see for this fight?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think if you look, as far as disappointing fighters, Krylov's right up there because I remember when he first came in, everyone was excited, and he's just been a disappointment. Anytime he gets to step up in competition, he usually falters. And this is the rematch that no one wanted. I don't know why this is happening, but here we are. And what's interesting about this is OSP by submission prop is plus 180 right now. So if you want to take that, I think that's probably a good bet here. And I'm surprised the line's so close because, yeah, OSP lost his last fight. And usually he's another guy that when he seems to get a step up, when it looks like he's potentially heading towards a title shot, he loses. But look who he lost to. His last fight, he lost to Reyes, Dominic Reyes, who, I think is still a top talent despite his last performance. He's looked good. I think overall, I'm taking OSP here. Overall, he's the better fighter.
And I don't see Nikita Krylov submitting OSP. And when you look down recent history, the only person that's knocked him out is Jimmy Manuwa. Like, Reyes couldn't do it. Jones couldn't do it. Volkan Ozdemir couldn't do it. Glover, went 3 rounds with him, but didn't knock him out. Bader couldn't do it. Shogun couldn't do it because Shogun got cracked. But there's a lot of guys who have that ability that didn't do it. Also, that was Dominic Reyes on his come up as well. So I am looking forward to that car crash. I really am. Alan Juban against Dwight Grant. The odds have Juban at a minus 120, Dwight Grant at a plus 100. James, what do you got here?
This is a coin flip, in my opinion, because Grant looked so good in his last fight, and the Grant that we saw leading up to him signing with the UFC, which is this guy who can finish fights. And with Juban, the thing that I'm worried about in this fight a little bit is the fact that he's 37 years old, hasn't fought since the Saunders win, which was February of 2018. So layoffs affect every fighter differently, but it is something to sort of keep in mind for this fight. The only thing is Juban, has a lot more experience. Grant's only got, he's got 11 fights. Juban's fought a lot more in the UFC. This is what Grant's third UFC fight. Had that fight against Zach Otto, I think should have gone his way, but nonetheless, it didn't come out on top in that one. I'll go Juban just because, again, I when it comes to fights, I got to look at the matchup on paper, not necessarily the external factors like the layoff and things like that. But I mean, Grant, I don't know. We'll see, because it's like you get two opposite fighters. Like his debut was disappointing in a fight against Otto that he should have won, and then his last fight, he got a highlight reel finish. So I'll lean on the side of the more experienced guy in Juban, and that he's tough to finish. Nico Price, finished him by knockout, but a lot of other fighters haven't been able to do so. So I'm going to go Juban, probably by decision in this fight.
It's one of those fights, Joe, where usually I would take a look at a guy and say, oh, okay, Dana White Contender Series product, they probably want him to win. But I get the feeling UFC probably likes Juban as well. But Juban, for a while, quite frankly, I thought maybe he was just done, because he had lost those 2 fights in a row in 2017, and he hasn't fought in 14 months or 13, 14 months, as James mentioned. I was like, maybe he's doing something else. Maybe he's out of it. But Dwight Grant, like we said, has the ability to finish somebody. I want to know what you think about this fight.
When you look back at Juban's record, his last 3 fights as an example, or 4 fights if you want to say it, right? I mean, the guy took out Mike Perry, okay? Went to the decision. He did defeat Mike Perry. Gunnar Nelson, he should never have let Gunnar Nelson anywhere near him, okay? Allowed it to happen, got submitted. The Nico Price fight, I thought he was going to take Nico Price down to the ground, or at least get some sort of clinch work, but he got rocked and then TKO'd. So there. Now going against Ben Saunders, Killer Beast, taking a lot of punishment over the years. So getting that KO victory, it was a good fight too. Those guys went back and forth. I think with Juban, as long as he doesn't get too aggressive, remains strategic, sticks to his game plan, should emerge victorious in this fight. And I think he could probably get a finish. He's just got to be smart about it. Is he not a high-level belt with Eddie Bravo?
I'm not sure.
Well, they're buddies for sure, because that was an issue in the last fight with Saunders, was that Saunders and Juban both worked with Bravo, so he kind of had to stay out of the fight. So that would make sense.
So he's got slick jiu-jitsu that he could use at any time, and potentially this is a fight here. It's just at some point, especially with his age, you got to be cerebral. You got to be smart. Can't just throw caution in the wind and then just start bombing with people. Just play it smart. You'll emerge victorious. If he does lose this fight here, I think that could be the end of his career in the UFC.
I'm going to go with Dwight Grant, because he did have that great finish. I thought he beat Zach Katow. I didn't know how Zach got that fight, but I think he's on a pretty good hot streak right now. Then we have Eric Anders minus 175. Khalil Roundtree, a plus 155. Eric Anders at light heavyweight is something that just needed to happen. Khalil Roundtree is the model of inconsistency in the UFC in this division. He is this highly touted prospect. He comes on The Ultimate Fighter, win-loss, win-loss. Steps into the UFC, loses a couple fights, wins a couple, loses one, wins one in a great performance. That Gokhan Saki fight.
Yeah.
Then he walks into Johnny Walker, which what can we say about that, Joe? Where he was, and nobody was going to beat Johnny Walker on that night. But I think that Eric Anders also has some of those issues. They're very similar in that respect. But Eric Anders at light heavyweight is something that needs to happen. But how do you see this one going? He's lost 3 of 4.
Yeah, well, this is to go back on what James was saying about Curtis Millender and Bilal Muhammad. This has the potential of also being a fight of the night candidate, because these two guys, the way they compete, it is fairly exciting. It's going to be very dangerous. I think I'm going to take Khalil Roundtree in this fight here. He's just got to be careful, though. Be smart about it. But I see a finish, man. I think he's going to TKO Eric Anders sometime in the second round.
How about you, James?
Oh, man, I'm going the other way. I like Anders in this fight. And one of the things I like about this is that Anders is actually training at Factory X for this camp. So the training partners won't be an issue at Spartan MMA and Fitness in Alabama. He was pretty much just training with Walt Harris. Like, he wasn't getting that high level, those high level bodies that he gets now at Factory X with like Ian Heinisch and Chris Camozzi and, a lot of the other bodies that are over there. And getting to work with Mark Montoya, who's one of the best coaches in the game, I think is also going to help. And him fighting at 205. I mean, I've done interviews when I interviewed him at UFC 231 before the Elias fight. Like, he cuts a lot of weight, not having to worry about that. We can finally see him at his true potential. I realized the Santos fight was at 205, but that was also a short notice opportunity here. So he's had a full camp, getting to eat what he wants. I think we're going to see probably the best Eric Anders we've seen. And I just think overall, he's got more tools to work with. That fight with Elias, I mean, people forget he nearly finished Elias, and I think it was in the second. And as we know, Elias is very tough to finish as well. I thought he beat Machida. The Tim Williams win, he was a little shaky in that one, but the Santos fight, he never quit in that one, and now Santos is fighting for a title. I just think overall Eric Anders has done a lot more and overall has more tools. So I'm going to go with him here. Now the question is, does he finish this fight? I don't know. I'll say he gets a hard-fought decision, but his hand will get raised in this one.
A fight that I had kind of overlooked in our preview, Andre Sukumtoth, a plus 375, Montel Jackson, a minus 470. Wow. That line is really, really big. By far the biggest line on the show, and it's not even close. James, what do you think of that line in the fight?
I'm a little surprised it's that much of a margin because, I guess they're basing it off of what Jackson did to Brian Kelleher in his last fight, which was just a quick, submission win. And he's got a really big build for the division. He's 5'10" with a 75-inch reach, whereas Sukumta, he's 5'9" with a 72-inch reach. So I guess not a huge difference, but nonetheless, I think the issue here is that, Sukumta hasn't fought like a ton, like he fought in October. Before that, I think it was in March. So maybe they're looking at that as well. But yeah, this is a little bit surprising. I think part of it too is just that Sukumta, other than that win he had, who was it, over Luke Sanders? I mean, he hasn't really. He usually goes the distance, and they're not like performances that were dominant. They were just wins that he sort of squeaked out here. Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely value here on Sukumta. Man, this is a tough one. I got to be honest.
I just think nobody will forgive him for his MMA intelligence when he had
with O'Malley, the whole thing where O'Malley's foot was hurt. Yeah,
right. So I think that's part of the reason that even the lines makers are like, nah, we're not giving this guy credit.
Yeah. I think I'll probably go with Jackson here, but I think the value for sure. I mean, there's absolutely value on Andre Sukumta plus 375. In fact, him by decision. What is that? That's got to be something crazy. Sukumta wins by decision is I don't think they have it. They have TKO, submission, distance. I'll look for it late. Oh, here we go. Plus 560. So not that much of a difference, but still, that's crazy, man. Like this could be a close fight for sure.
Elsewhere on this show, the big fights. Well, wait, I think we're there.
There we are.
Okay. Israel Adesanya, a minus 175. Kelvin Gastelum, a plus 155. This for the interim middleweight championship. James, you spoke to Israel Adesanya ahead of this fight. Kelvin Gastelum has a lot of tools. I think he's going to be a little overmatched in the size department. I would expect Israel Adesanya to wisely keep his distance and look to strike from the outside. How do you see this one going?
I'm going Israel in this one, and I know a lot of people will say he's overhyped and he didn't look good in his last fight. Look, he fought Anderson Silva. Not everyone's going to put away Anderson Silva and finish him. I mean, even at his age, Silva, just style-wise, was not a great matchup for Israel. So I think that expectation that he was supposed to go out there and finish him in the first round, I think is not – a lot of guys can't do that against Anderson Silva. I just think the upsides with him here, and the thing I like with him too is the fact that, you know, he's fought more frequently. You know, Gastelum, because of the Whitaker fight getting canceled, he actually hasn't fought since May of last year. That's a long layoff. I realize he's not, you know, super old. He's only 27. In fact, I think a lot of people forget that Gastelum's actually younger than Israel Adesanya. Adesanya's 29. But I think there's things that Israel does in his fight game. We've seen that in the Tavares fight. We've seen that with what he did to Derek Brunson. I think there's things that he does that are just above average. And I think that, you know, if this fight stays standing, especially, I think that I think Israel will be able to outstrike Calvin Gastelum in this fight. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Weidman was able to defeat him. That was back in 2017. You know, the fight against Souza was close. I think that was a good matchup too. But, you know, his biggest wins are against guys that, you know, aren't even in the UFC anymore. Hendricks, Tim Kennedy, Michael Bisping. I really like what Adesanya's done. I'm leaning on the side because this is one of those situations where it's like, we're really going to figure out how good Israel Adesanya is. I think this is the fight that does it. I think this is the test for the title. I think this is where he comes through. I've been a believer in his for a while. Look, when he beat Marvin Vettori, I was like, yeah, okay, we can slow the brakes down a little bit. I think the fight I was the most impressed was the Tavares fight, just because going into that fight, Tavares had a nice winning streak and Israel completely dominated him, and he got to show off, you know, the fact that he could go the full distance in a fight. So I like Israel here. I know people are going to say Gastelum can surprise again. He absolutely could, because, you know, I've underestimated him a lot. But I really like what Israel brings to the table, and I think he gets it done here by decision. I think this does go the full 3 rounds, but Israel is able to keep it on the feet, stop those takedowns, and he's able to take home a decision.
It's not 5 rounds?
Go ahead.
This is not 5 rounds?
Yeah, it is 5 rounds.
Okay, all right. Yeah, Israel Adesanya will win this fight. He'll pick apart Kelvin Gastelum. He'll stuff the takedowns. He'll just work, be patient. I think the kid's fight IQ is absolutely fantastic. Kelvin Gastelum, in my opinion, has to close the distance, control Adesanya's limbs, do not let him strike, control him, take him down, and just work for, you know, just a maul and brawl TKO victory on the ground. Forget the submission. Just punish him, punish him, punish him. If he cannot do that, I think Israel will just simply pick him apart. He's got 25 minutes to do it. I think he'll use up a lot of that. I don't think it'll go the distance. I think he'll catch Kelvin Gastelum, rock him, and then go in there for the finish and get that TKO.
I'm very curious about the future of this middleweight division following this. Obviously, we'll have Whitaker versus the winner. Then you got Romero, who loses and just got pulled from a fight. Rockhold's hitting the bricks. He's gone. Souza probably needs a win. If he doesn't win this month, that could spell trouble, because then you've got Gastelum or Adesanya, who will be coming off of a loss. Chris Weidman, I'll believe it when I see it in the cage. Paulo Costa.
Yeah.
Paulo Costa, conspicuous by his absence, we'll say, in light of some things. they need some people to develop. They really do. Or maybe just somebody move up from welterweight. I see middleweight in the same space that light heavyweight was in about a year ago, where it was wide open, and somebody who's moving from a division to here could really end up doing themselves a great.
If Jack Hermanson gets that win over Sousa, look out, right? He's going to go up the rankings real quick.
Sure. Main event: Dustin Poirier, a plus 180 rather, against Max Holloway, a minus 220. I am super interested in this fight, because while they are both very exciting fighters, they are both like really, really different. Poirier's output starts off really, really high and decreases, while Holloway's gets better and better and better. I think he's more active in the 4th round than any round that he fights in. Holloway will feel you out and pick you apart, while Poirier is like, just let me do everything. Let me throw kicks at you, jabs at you, straights at you, hooks, uppercuts, and then I'm going to find what works, and then I'm going to stick to that and go that way. I love the way that the contrast in when they do find success. One of them just wades in. The other one stands on the outside and is a little more calculated in Holloway. But with Poirier, it kind of sets up takedowns because he's so wild. It raises people's guard. He drags them down. There are a lot of interesting parallels and contrasts to this fight, Joe, What are you looking forward to, and who do you think wins?
Take Dustin on the under, Max on the over. Just like you said, the way you broke it down is very succinct. Dustin can land those power shots, and if he lands those power shots, Max will be woken up, or not woken up. He could be sleeping pretty quickly because Poirier has some power behind those punches, and he'll be looking to cut that cage off. Not as quick as he would in a 3-round fight, but it's a 5-round fight, so he's got to be patient. My only concern with Dustin Poirier is the MMA mileage, because he's been doing it for a long time, way back down in Louisiana with Tim Crater and all that. So it's been a long road for Dustin Poirier. But he's focused. I saw him at the Two Titans show 2 events ago. Yeah, 2 events ago. And it's just, the guy looks absolutely fantastic. We had a good conversation. And it was the day before the announcement was made of this fight here. So he's a jerk, in my opinion, for not telling me. But I think he can do it early. If he can't do it early and begins to fade, Max Holloway, depending on the punishment he may have taken leading up to the 3rd or 4th round, I think Max Holloway could pull off a victory here, even by TKO.
James, your thoughts?
You guys aren't even talking about the fact this guy destroyed Jose Aldo twice. I mean, I mean, that is something we have to consider here. Look at what Aldo's been able to do after losing to Max Holloway. Like, that is a huge win. Add in the fact that Holloway, the biggest thing, what do we always talk about? What was the narrative heading into his last fight with Brian Ortega that everyone was talking about? The weight cut. He made weight. He doesn't even have to worry about that for this fight because, yes, he still has to cut weight, but those extra 10 pounds, I mean, I think Max is going to look better at 55 than he did at 45, not having the weight cut. And, you know, you guys are talking about, or Joe was talking about, you know, potentially Poirier getting an early finish. I don't see it. Holloway's never been knocked out. He's Hawaiian. I think in your blood, that means you don't get knocked out.
That's a good point. Never mind.
You know, it's Conor McGregor couldn't knock him out. I mean, this is, to me, Max is going to be even better at 55, in my opinion, because he's not cutting that extra weight. And I just look at experience here. I mean, both guys have fought, you know, the who's who. Max has fought in more title fights, you know, being the champion. And I mean, what this is, as far as like the builds, I mean, Max is 5'11", 69-inch reach. Poirier is what, 73-inch reach, 5'9". So the height-wise are the same. Poirier has a slight reach, but I don't know. I think Holloway's going to get this done. To me, it's just, it's his ability to just, you know, go in and talk about taking shots. I mean, Aldo did hit him a couple times in both fights, and he was able to just walk right through it. I think if Poirier can't put him out, like Joe was saying, I think it's his to take, especially as the fight goes on later. I think you're going to see, you know, Holloway really take over. The reason I'm picking Holloway here, and again, Poirier has put on some great performances. I'm not downplaying any of that. I mean, finishing Eddie Alvarez, finishing Gaethje, finishing Pettis, those are all impressive. But what Holloway did to Brian Ortega in his last fight, like, make him look like he's never looked before, where he just completely outclassed him, and then to beat Aldo twice before that, there's no way I can pick against him. I'm going Holloway here. Late finish, 3rd round. You heard it here first.
I'm going Holloway as well. I think it's going to happen in that same round. I think this is going to be just a categorically different fight than the first one. Obviously, it ended in 3.5 minutes via submission. I don't think there's any way Dustin Poirier submits Max Holloway here. The level of growth that Max Holloway has experienced over, gosh, what is it, 7 years now? It's been 7 years since they fought. It's crazy to think that Max Holloway is even old enough to have fought 7 years ago, because I still think of him as that 24, 23-year-old prospect that is really emerging. He's on the scene, and we have to wonder what becomes of the featherweight title if he wins this, Joe. Does he give up the featherweight title?
Considering this guy loves to fight every single month, I'm going to say no. I know Dana may want him to do it, but I can't see him doing it. He'll try and convince Dana that, you know, I'll fight every other month. Put me on headline every single pay-per-view if I have to. I'm in. I'll defend one title, next title, or I'll try and unify the title with Habib when he's ready. But I don't think Max will want to relinquish that title. He'll try and negotiate his way to keep both.
How about yourself, James?
He said on Luke Thomas's show he's going to defend his featherweight title. I'm almost positive. So I think you will see that. Now, here's the thing. If Aldo wins, if he beats Volkanovski, which again, we're hearing stuff, you know, Aldo had some sickness or some health stuff heading into the Volkanovski fight. We don't even know if that's 100% on. If Aldo's able to beat Volkanovski, I think the chances of Holloway staying at 55 and not defending his title are greater. Although you still have this X factor in Frankie Edgar, the fight that I think at this point, I mean, I want to get a pull from you guys. I don't really care to see that fight right now. Like, I know Edgar's Edgar, but him losing to Ortega and, you know, beating Cub the way he did, it wasn't like anything amazing. I don't know. I just don't have any interest to see that fight anymore. To me, I think if Aldo beats Volkanovski, then I think Max should just stay at lightweight. But if Volkanovski goes out there and finishes Aldo and does something crazy, then you have to do that fight. I mean, come on. That Volkanovski's what he did to Mendez in his last fight, I think there is reason to suggest that he could beat Aldo. So, I mean, I think that fight is really going to determine what happens with Max at featherweight.
That's UFC 236, and it's time for my UFC 236 I got 5 on it picks. Now, again, these are just underdog betting flyers. I'm not necessarily picking the fighter to win. I just think these are the 3 best options on the card for betting lines, and not even necessarily underdog betting lines. Even though, yeah, I guess they all technically would be. I'm going OSP at -105. I can't believe that Nikita Krylov is favored at -115 in this fight. It is shocking to me. And when I look at that, St. Preux is a +180 via submission. To me, it's wild that somebody can be an underdog, but the line for a prop bet like that still be that, I don't know, that close to even. I don't see any way that Nikita Krylov beats OSP. Laura Mueller, +155 against Polyana Botelho. Both of these women had fairly quick submission losses, and there's a prop bet at +655 for Botelho to win by submission. Mueller winning by submission is a +1315. I think somebody very well could get submitted in this fight. I just don't know who, but I think it's worth the +155 on Botelho. When I look at Andre Sukumtoth, that line is just too good to be true, considering his experience level. Montel Jackson was not a pro fighter before 2017. I think maybe that could play a little bit of a factor. Now, he fought as an amateur well before that, but -470, do I think that he's a good fighter? Yes. Do I think that he's winning this? Probably. But +375? Damn. I got 5 on it. Before we wrap up, news dropped last week. Josh Barnett signing with Bellator, Joe. I think it's a hell of a fit.
No, it's not. Should be signing with Ryzen.
Well, okay. Fair.
Yeah, it's a good fit. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for Josh. It's going to be good. He's still able to continue his career, right? So good for him.
James, we see that Fedor fight?
Yeah, they have to. Hey, let's look. Guys, remember? It's supposed to happen. Affliction.
Yeah, I know. That's you got to make that fight happen.
Listen, for you MMA fans who are a little bit newer here, Affliction was supposed to have a card, and it got completely canceled because Barnett got popped by back when they didn't even have USADA. I don't know what it was that was testing back then. So that fight has to happen, 100%.
Yeah, that's just come on. And what else was supposed to be on that show? Was there anything? What was set? It was 11 days before the event.
Hold on, I'll read the card to you. Hold on here. We're going to do some live stuff. Vitor Belfort was supposed to fight Jorge Santiago. Babalu was supposed to fight Gegard Mousasi. They ended up fighting in Strikeforce. Tim Sylvia, Paul Buentello. Jay Heron, Paul Daly. Chris Horodecki, remember him, fighting Joe Lozon. Not a bad card.
That's a hell of a card. That's a nice card. I remember
that's a collector's item, by the way. They don't make those anymore.
I remember on the band card, you had Nog and Vitor Belfort, and like on the prelims, it was pretty good shows. They were just tossing out money. Joe, let the people know what you're up to this week and where they can find you on social media.
Same old. At Showdown Joe. You can follow me Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, you name it. Same old for me. Work, and winding down the indoor soccer season, prepping for the outdoor soccer season. So lots of fun there. And nobody call me tomorrow. Ross Sapp, James Lynch, between 3 o'clock and 4:30. As Juventus is playing in Champions League, I will not be your friend tomorrow for an hour and a half.
Hey, I'm telling people to stay out of my DMs and my phone on Thursday. Tomorrow, we have the Listen Ya Boy moving from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. So a lot of people are like, oh, your weekend's over after SmackDown after WrestleMania. No, we've got a major launch of a show at 6 p.m. tomorrow. But James, what do you have going on this week? I'm sure lots of stuff before 236.
Oh, you bet. Well, let's plug the UFC 236. I can't even speak. UFC 236 content. Israel Adesanya interview up on Fightful. Eric Anders interview up on Fightful. Alan Jouban, Andre Sukumtoth. Yeah, check those out all on Fightful.com. And I got to mention, this weekend, I'm going to be doing commentary for Rise FC their third card coming up here this Saturday. You can watch it live on Fight TV. Bantamweight champion Craig McLean defending his title against flyweight champion Chad Enghelger. Going to be a great night of fights. And Jamie Siraj is on that show too. He's a protege of Cajun Johnson. Some good MMA going on this weekend. So if you guys are in the area, check it out. If not, watch it on Fight TV.
Oh, one more thing, Sean, if I may, just that James just reminded me. Last Ryzen show, there was the Mayweather and Nasukawa fight. Ryzen just scored a deal with Manny Pacquiao. He will be at the next show that I'm leaving for next Thursday. So Manny Pacquiao will be there. The announcement of what he will be doing will be coming out shortly.
Yeah, actually, I meant to touch on that. Really excited to find out that news. Joe, risk your job and give us the scoops.
I don't have anything yet. I don't think he's going to be honest with you, there's a Philippine fighter on the card. And I think Manny's going to be there to support. I don't know for sure. I think that's what it is. I don't think they scored any sort of deal with Manny fighting on this card, but do not be surprised if they're trying to score something to have him compete in another card.
Well, guys, help us score those thumbs up. It goes a long way. It helps people find us. If you want to help us out on iTunes as well, I know most of you actually listen here on iTunes and Stitcher and all that. Leave a nice review. That stuff goes a long way as well. Subscribe to our MMA channel, youtube.com/Fightful MMA Boxing, and join us. Live coverage Saturday night, UFC 236. We have usually for pay-per-views over 1,000 comments in our live discussion, which is more than a lot of the top MMA websites in the world have. Thank you guys so much. Till next time.